Here they are landing, and you can see the pudding effect of the soil, and now you see those strange, what I call special effects light rays. If that were really sand, it would be covering up all of that, which is beneath it, but it doesn't fill in holes, doesn't cover mounds, and it looks like light rays photographed underwater, not dust being shot away at a 10,000-pound thrust rocket engine. And you can see here, nothing gets covered up, nothing changes when it lands. There it is.
The original plan had called for Young and Duke to get out and explore shortly after landing. However, the near abort had lasted 6 hours. The tired astronauts would sleep. Their first traverse would take them about 1 kilometer west of the landing site. They would make 2 stops to collect samples and conduct experiments.
Now this is the most interesting thing, Frank. There's the rover on the top of the hill. Notice the rock in the center. It looks like an alligator with its mouth open. And look at all the other rocks. You're going to see them again.
John, you're just beautiful. That is the most beautiful sight.
Note the rover on the top of the hill.
Today they were headed a little over 4 kilometers south to climb their rover up the side of Stone Mountain. Their first station, a crater 700 feet above their lunar module.
And there it is again, Frank. The same mountain, the same alligator rock, different time, different... set somewhere in America.
It's absolutely unreal.
They should have caught this, but they didn't. If there's ever proof that you faked all of this, this frame alone would do it. Shot somewhere in the American desert. It's all showbiz, Frank. This appears to be high noon on the moon, 250 degrees in the sun. They should have cooked and baked inside that limb. And Eastman Kodak told me that film melts at 150 degrees. None of the film taken on the moon at this type of temperature should have survived. It should have been crisp like in an oven and curled and melted.
171 hours and 37 minutes.
Columbia.
For all the success and spin put on the Apollo moon missions in the late 1960s, NASA has never fully answered the question, why have they never returned to the moon? Some ex-NASA employees know the answer, and that is that the moon is crawling with aliens. And that NASA astronauts confirmed this in the 1970s, leading many UFO researchers to conclude that NASA had been warned off ever returning to the lunar surface. UFO activity on the moon was nothing new to the ex-Nazis who engineered the Apollo moon missions. For centuries, astronomers all over the world, including Nazi Germany, had been reporting UFOs flying over the lunar surface. The Lunar Anomalies Report was commissioned by NASA in the years preceding the famous Apollo missions in the late 1960s. For more than 3 years, NASA financed several research scientists to collate a catalogue of anomalous lights which had been reported on the lunar surface by leading astronomers and scientists since the Elizabethan era. In 1968, the public version of the NASA research was published under the title Document R277. This public version of NASA's survey of lunar UFOs included nearly 600 strange events which took place between the years 1540 and 1967. This official NASA catalogue of strange lunar UFOs included reports from some of the world's most famous astronomers. For example, NASA included a report from the brilliant French astronomer Gian Cassini, who reported seeing a white cloud hovering over the lunar surface in 1671. Another report suggested that the moon had an atmosphere when two astronomers reported lightning above the lunar surface on May the 18th, 1787. Just 1 month before, in the same year, 1787, the man who discovered Uranus, one of the pioneers of modern astronomy, Sir Frederick William Herschel, claimed to have observed several bright lights traversing across the lunar surface. Small luminous orbs of light, commonly referred to as luminosities, have been reported on more than 200 occasions. In February 1877, a streak of white light was observed for more than 1 hour. On April the 23rd, 1915, a beam of light was seen inside the Clavius crater. One of the UFO hotspots on the lunar surface is the Plato crater, where literally dozens of luminous orbs of light have been reported by astronomers. In addition to luminous UFOs on the lunar surface, NASA recorded the existence of mysterious shadows. In 1882, near the Aristotle area of the lunar surface, several dark shadows were seen. On September the 13th, 1959, astronomers were unable to photograph the Lithro area of the lunar surface due to a large dark mass obscuring the terrain. And on September the 11th, 1967, Canadian astronomers reported a black cloud with violet edges floating across the Sea of Tranquility, the exact area chosen by NASA for the first Apollo moon landing in 1969. Previous to the publication of the anomalous lunar report, in 1965, NASA launched Operation Moonblink, a project involving top observatories all over planet Earth. NASA's goal was to collect data on the large number of luminosities seen flying over the lunar surface. Operation Moonblink also investigated various large structures which had been photographed by unmanned NASA satellites. Some of these structures looked suspiciously artificial. In 1953, the science editor of the New York Herald Tribune had reported seeing a 12-mile-long structure, possibly a bridge, on the edge of the Mare Crisium crater. This structure could have been caused by volcanic activity. British astronomers Dr. H.P. Wilkins and the presenter of the world's longest-running TV series, The Sky at Night, Sir Patrick Moore, both confessed that the so-called bridge in the Mare Crisium crater had just popped up from nowhere. In preparation for the NASA Apollo moon missions, Orbiter 3 was dispatched to take photographs of some of the moon's most interesting structures. In the Ukert area of the moon, a large vertical structure stands proud of the lunar surface. It has been nicknamed the Shard. Another curious object photographed by Orbiter 3 is the so-called tower, which some astronomers claim is over a mile thick and could be 5 miles high. After looking carefully through hundreds of NASA photos returned to Earth by Orbiter 3 and its predecessor, Orbiter 2, American author George Leonard published a book called Somebody Else is on the Moon. George Leonard presented many photos in his book, some showing very long tracks in the lunar dust. Tracks which he said had been made by aliens. Sightings of UFOs flying across the lunar surface are still going on to this day. In Japan, amateur astronomers have videotaped spherical luminosities using celestron telescopes. NASA's investment in studying UFOs on the moon was money well spent. 2 ex-NASA mission specialists exposed in the 1970s that NASA astronauts had informed Mission Control that they had seen alien spaceships on the lunar surface. In 1976, an ex-NASA employee, Otto Binder, accused NASA of censoring transmissions from the Apollo astronauts by switching to secret radio frequencies and using code names for UFOs. Otto Binder claimed that he had heard an Apollo astronaut tell Mission Control that there were huge alien spaceships parked on the lunar surface, right in the middle of the Sea of Tranquility, which had been chosen as the landing site for Apollo 11.
That's one small step for man, one Stay uplift for mankind.
Few people took Otto Binder's account seriously, until another ex-NASA employee, a Moroccan named Maurice Chatelain, published a book in 1978 in which he claimed that 2 UFOs hovered above the Sea of Tranquility just before the historic moonwalk of Neil Armstrong. Maurice Chatelain was a NASA insider. He invented many of the radio and radar communication systems for the Apollo missions. He had 11 patents awarded for his inventions and had a high-level NASA security clearance, able to talk freely with senior NASA officials. In his book, he quoted radio transmissions between Apollo astronauts and mission control. According to Maurice Chatelain, the astronauts informed NASA that there were alien spacecraft lined up on the far side of a nearby crater, observing the historic moonwalk of Neil Armstrong. During his time working on the Apollo space program, Chatelain learnt that aliens not only exist, but that they have had a major role in shaping, and in some cases destroying.
Okay, friends, subscribers and people of the world and all you YouTube watchers, spread the word about this video. What this video is going to prove, that there are cities on the moon. This is a second video about cities on the moon. This is actually a recent addition to Google Moon, and it's the Tycho crater. They've now made it so that the resolution is almost perfect. Whilst I was actually looking at the Tycho crater, I just zooming around and having a look at it because it's a new addition to it, and I noticed something. I noticed what looked to be cities, similar to what I was seeing over in the on the dark side, but this was where the city was more intense. Was on the shaded side of the crater. In other words, it gets mostly shade all the time. It's protected from the sunlight the most. And what I started seeing was the cities again. But notice where the north is. Notice it's also in the direction that these cities go in. And I started noticing that wherever these squares were appearing, and it's not just pixelation, folks, trust me, this is not pixelation. Look at the pixelation to the side there down on the bottom left-hand corner. It's quite small. Yet look at these. These are buildings, quite large. That line there in that photo is over 2 kilometres. So hence, that would say, okay, that's a very big city with very big buildings. I thought they were rock falls at first. But then just something just got to me, and they're square, like at the top. Everything has got a north-south direction to it, east-west, like we do on Earth. We build buildings north, south, east, west. That is very important to us. In the pyramids, they built them north, south, east, and west. And I kept on seeing this. Now, there's quite a lot I didn't take photos of because they were rock falls. And they appeared to be rock falls, yet they again could still be just camouflaged cities. Now look at this. Notice the north-south. It's got a north-south, east-west directional. Again, there's big buildings, there's large buildings, but there's also streets. Now that's what really got me, is there's streets in this. And again, that area you are looking at is about 2 kilometres. Most of these cities that I did, I measured around about a 2 kilometre photo. Before I took it, I did include the line in some of them. Now, that one is actually built into the side of the cliff. And it's best to watch this in full screen, by the way, and you'll notice and see what I'm seeing. And again, that north-south direction is extremely important. And it's not the pixelation, because the pixelation is way smaller than what these buildings are appearing. Like us, they like scenic views. And again, there's the north-south direction. Look at the buildings. That one there looks like it's a tower that goes, the one to the left, looks like it's a tower building. It's got three or four different levels, and it comes in like we build those big buildings. We build them fancy, and they come in every now and then, and they look like a spire, a steeple. Yeah, there's a big building to the side of it, attached to it. It could be a church. It could be a monument. I don't know. Now this one, notice the triangular reflection from that big white building. Now, to me, that says something's going on here. And again, that town is 2 kilometres wide. There's another one up to the top, and it looks like there's farmland. Look at how all these squares are coming together. And okay, if it was pixelation, why is it north-south? Look at the section down the bottom. You tell me that is a tunnel or a bridge of some description. And again, it looks like farmland. Now, like in China, you look at the pictures of China on Google Earth and you zoom down on them. They hide them in valleys, sometimes they're on hills. We do exactly the same thing in our countries, in Australia. But look at the squareness of these buildings, of these cities. It's absolutely amazing that this north-south configuration comes into it. Now, at first I thought this one was a rockfall until I started noticing that some of these buildings are really buildings, and you can tell that they're damn well buildings. There's fences, there's dead set squares, and just too many things in there that says this is not a rockfall, this is a city built on a hill. And again, the same thing. Look, it's got streets, it's got everything. And again, that is 2 kilometres wide. I took each one of these photos of each section of the towns. I took a photo. Some of these are actually quite longer. There are sectional photos of the bigger city, but the widths of the city were round about 2 kilometres, if not more, wide. There was one that was 5 by 3. I think it was 5 kilometres by 3 kilometres. That's it there. That's the 5 kilometres, and it was 3 kilometres wide. And again, that is a city. They're buildings, and they really are buildings. You need to see this, and you need to zoom in on these pictures. Go and look at Google Earth yourself, and look at the Google Moon. Go to the Tycho crater, have a look. Because I can tell you now, folks, they'll do the same thing they did with the other one. They'll take it out and they'll blur it. So while you can, get over, take the photos yourself, get the proof on your computers so that they can't do what they did the last time I went public about cities on the moon, where they took the whole section of the crater out. That one didn't appear. It turned out to be a blurred image. It was taken off for 2 months while they blurred the images. They're most probably going to think that, okay, we're going to think that these are rockfalls, but okay, look at them. There's round buildings, there's square buildings, there's oblong buildings. Rocks don't fall in those patterns. And look at down there what looks to be fields. This is not natural. These are like us. They build on hill. That one actually looks like it's built into the hillside. And there is just too many anomalies. You can see windows in this shot. This one's, and again, it's a downward shot of it. Look at the buildings. There's long buildings. They're structural. They're in alignment with each other. Rocks don't fall in perfect alignment. There's no way that they do. These are buildings. They're covering up the fact that these are cities, folks. They are covering up the fact that there is life on the moon. This is why we have never returned to the moon. There's life up there, folks, and they didn't want, like we were invading. We didn't go up there. We didn't go up there and say hi. We went up there to sort of just go up there and think. We didn't contact them. Instead of going and seeing them, like if they came to us, like we shoot at UFOs all the time because they don't come and say hello. If they landed, said hello, this is who we are, we're from the moon, bang, we'd have a relationship with these people. The same way that explorers travel around the world, they make a point of introducing themselves. But when we go into space, because they're of a different being, we don't introduce ourselves. That one interested me. That reminded me of the limestone hills. That's why I took a photo of that. That looks like a picture of man and a smaller creature, and again down to another smaller creature. It looked, and as I said, it looked like the limestone hills, and so I took a photo of that one. But the thing is, there's life up there, folks. Many of us have known, not believed, known for years. Now that is a shot that of that other city I took on a different angle, just to show you that even from the other angle, you can see the structure of these streets. You can see the structure of these buildings. And they are buildings. Look to the left. That's a rockfall. Look to the top. They're square, they're oblong. You can tell the difference between a rock and a building. I can. Look at this one. This is absolutely amazing. There is too many squares, and there's circles in this one. And you've only got to look at the structure. But look at the north, south, east, west direction of these cities. Every single one of these cities has the standard building procedure that we have on Earth. North to south, east and west. North, south, east and west, even in a small town. Now, that small little town was still 1 kilometre wide. 1 kilometre across. So that says that's a pretty big little town. So what are they hiding from us, folks? They're hiding the fact that there is really, truly life upon the moon. Right? They might not have streets outside of their towns because they travel in UFOs, but they would have streets where they walk and talk with each other. Look at that. That is a major city, that one. That one was quite a few kilometres across. I think that one was 3 to 4 kilometres across and about 10 kilometres wide. But just look at the structure of it, folks. There is cities as if they're built on certain sections. They haven't built on other sections, like us. We build on hills every single day. Why would not an alien race build on hills? Again, that's that same photo. I don't know how that one's got in there twice. Sorry about that, folks. But the thing is, folks, there is life out there, and there's proof of it now. These are unblurred images. I managed to snap them and everything straight away, and it just looks like as if we're looking down on a picture of Earth. You see the squares outside the city, which are farms. Then you see the buildings within the city. You see bushy areas, and as it's been proven that there are colours on the moon, yet we're not being shown the colours. We only get shown the greyed out greyscale images, as if we're still in black and white. We're not in black and white. They're just hiding the truth, because 10 to 1, if they showed that, you would see colours. Look at it. That is a city. If you looked upon Google Earth and looked at that, straight away you'd say that's a city. Right? You wouldn't say, oh no, that's a rockfall. You'd say it's a city. It's built up. You can see it's a city. And that one's a bloody major city. There's major buildings, like in all cities, in the central district. Okay, there's a couple of hills in the middle, and then everything's built around it. That's like here on Earth. There's hilly areas, but down in the lower areas, on the flatter sections, they build cities. That's exactly what they have done here. They've built cities on the flatter sections of the hills, maybe even on some of the steeper areas. But, like us, we build on very steep areas down here, so why would they not up there? So, we're talking about a civilization that has survived up there. And, oh yeah, what did I take that photo for? Oh yeah, to me that looks like a water reservoir or some kind of factory or a dam of some. That's right. It looks more like a dam. Look at it. There's two sides to that, and it looks like there's something in the middle. And I think that's a dam or a water reservoir. You can see buildings and pipelines coming into it. Now, to me, that says there's someone on the moon for sure. There is something going on. We don't know what it is because we've never been told the bloody truth. Now, look at that. There, in the left-hand side, in the middle, you'll see what looks to be buildings within a yarded feature, as if it's like the old-fashioned castles where they had the buildings inside, they had the walls protecting the rich. Okay, we might have the same thing up there. That's what it looks like to me. And yeah, here we've got buildings all over the place, and I mean buildings. And on the outskirts, we've got what look to be farm sections off. And when you see them sectioned off, yeah, you look down upon any picture of Earth, you see those squared, different coloured sections that looks like pixelations when you zoom out on them. But when you zoom in, lo and behold, what do you got? Farms. Okay, so what you're looking here, okay, look at it. Just look at the picture. There's squares, there's oblongs, there's a zigzag building right in the dead centre. Okay, that's not a rock. Okay, now look at that one. That's a tower. You can see on the bottom left-hand side, you can see what looks to be a spire coming up with the thing on the top. Look at the shadow of it, folks. They're towers. They're actual towers. That one to me looks like definite city. The shadows from them say city. Like Machu Picchu, they built Machu Picchu up on a thing. How did they get there? No one knows. Maybe they were from the moon and they built the same way that they're building up on the moon, without roads, and they built it on the hill. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, actually, that one got me. This picture got me. It sort of looks like there's definitely something there. I couldn't work out what this one was. But again, I think this could be some kind of complex. That one is a face cut into the rock. A face cut into rock. There was another face a little bit further down. Oh, no, there it is. You can just see it up the top corner. There's another face cut into the rock. Similar to Mars. Actually, there were two faces on that. But there was there's the building there. That could be there. What do they call that bloody thing in America where they've got their heads cut into the mountains? But again, there's another city. That small town, I think that small town was over about half a kilometre wide. But it's still north-south direction. Those buildings are in the north-south bloody direction. There's something about feng shui or something about north, south, east, west that's been passed down through the centuries, and I think this is what it's all about. Like, we have north, south, east, west directions when we build our homes. And again, you zoom down on this and it looks even more like a city, but look at the street structure. That's why I did this one. I did it because of the street structures of it. But those street structures are in north, south, east, west. North, south, east and west. Rockfalls don't fall in bloody straight lines. Rockfalls don't build in north, south, east, west directions. This and the other photos I'm showing you are cities on the moon. Cities on the moon. Look at it, folks. It's a damn well city on the Tycho crater. Go to Google Moon right now, as soon as you watch this video, and look at it. Zoom in on the bloody things and make your own minds up, folks, because the only way that the truth is going to get out there is if you go and take the photos of it, Control-Alt-S yourself, and save the damn images. Control-Alt-S, Control-Alt-S, Control-Alt-S. Save as many images as you can. Look at the north, south, east, west directions. But look at this one. This, to me, says that looks like a river of some description. Zooming around a town. There's something that is a rounded section around a town. What do we have on Earth? We build cities near rivers. We know something's going on. We've known for some time that there's major cover-ups going up when it comes to the moon. Major cover-ups. Yet, again, we've had no proof. But here's your proof, folks. Cities on the moon. Buildings on the moon. that they haven't covered up this time. This, in my other video, you don't see the buildings as well as this, because I went public before I snapped the photos, and that I made that mistake of only having the video shots of it, or what I took from a video camera. From this time, I've done it by photos, which I should have done by the first time, and you would have seen the same sort of thing, because this is what alerted me into the other thing. Go and have a look at my other videos, Cities on the Moon. It was one of my first videos uploaded. And you will see that in some sections of it, this is a pure cover-up. It's nothing more than a cover-up. But you'll see in any one of the streets, there are north, south, east, west directions. There's a complex building there. There's complex buildings in this one. And you can see there's one that looks to be a pyramid at the top, sort of into the middle. Looks almost pyramidal. But look at everything. And there's streets, folks. You can see the streets. You've only just got to look at it. And you've got to say, okay, something's going on here. What is going on? A bloody big cover-up, folks. We've been lied to. Now, that city there was, I think, was 4 kilometres in distance across. Okay, it's got hills in it, yes. But when you zoom in on that one, again, you get the same thing. You get buildings built on the side of the mountain. That's what I mean. You look at it there, it looks like a rock slide until you zoom in on the damn thing. But the moment you zoom in on it, what are you going to see? You're going to see buildings and streets in north, south, east, west directions. There it is there. Look at it. North, south, east, west. You can see the streets. You can see everything. They are not boulders. They are bloody buildings. They've got streets. They've got infrastructure. You can see it. It looks like parking lots even, where they park their spacey ships next to the big supermarket. What can I say, folks? They're cities. They're nothing more than cities. If you look down at a mosaic like that on Google Earth from a distance about what we're looking at, I forgot what the elevation. Oh, okay, that's looking from a couple of kilometres up. That's exactly what you'd see on Earth. You'd see little speckly buildings. You wouldn't see good definition. You would see all the same sort of thing. Yet when you zoom in on it, you start to see the more buildings. But because they won't show us the full image, what you see is just crap. And again, I've zoomed out on this one. But in this one, you can see some of the bigger buildings. They still hold their squares even at that distance. Up the top to the right, you can see 2 big buildings together. And they hold that square section perfectly. Yet when you zoom in on that, what you see are streets and everything, because here's the zoomed in shot of it. You see streets, you see rectangle buildings, you see square buildings, you see the occasional circle, but mainly you see, and down there on the top right, you see terraces in the landscape. You see a big white building, you see different colour roofs. Again, that's same on Earth. You see different coloured roofs. And when you zoom out on Earth, you get the same effect. You don't see a city, you see crap. You see the what looks that could be a city, but when you zoom in on it, now look at this. There is structure being cut into those mountains there. And it says something. It says that's an artificial landscape at the top middle. You can see in the bottom middle, artificial landscape. You can see parts of the town. And again, everything is in the north, south, east, west directional shot of these cities. There's no difference in them. There's a triangular structure up in the top middle to the right a bit. But it's not a pyramid, I don't think, but just look at it, folks. There, everything is north, south, east, or west direction. I can't say anything more. Everywhere I looked, everything had that north, south, east, west directional look. You've got to remember, these photos are taken at an elevation of 1 kilometre, right? And that's where I'm taking the photos from a kilometre, so that you can see the structure. If you zoom in on them, you'll see even better shots of the buildings, and you will see them. What I'll do, I might take some more shots and do a second video of them, but I'd sooner show you this and let you go and have a look at it for yourself, because you can see the buildings, you can see it's a city structure. It's got streets, it's got buildings all over the place, it's got external things that look like farms. We're not being shown the truth. What we need to know is the truth, folks. We have the legal right to know the truth. We are a civilization now that understands that there could be life out there. We are smart enough to know that there's life out there. We are smart enough to know that only idiots would believe that we are alone in the universe. From our knowledge that we have gained over the centuries, and the understanding and the wisdom that mankind has learned over the years. Okay, there's a zoomed in shot. I actually didn't realise I'd already done it, folks. You can see what I mean, that square structure. You can even see lights. Now, what I'm saying, folks, it's time for disclosure. In every single country, we have a legal right to disclosure, folks, and it's about damn well time that they come forward with the truth. So what? There's life out there. There's life out there. God, there's life on Earth. And the politicians are the idiots, because they think that we're dumb enough to continually to believe their crap trap that we are alone in the universe. For God's sake, all you idiot politicians, come clean. We have the legal right to know, and we're going to constantly harass the governments until we get our legal right fulfilled, because we have that right to have the disclosure. We have the right to have the disclosure now, not in 6 months, not in 2 years. We have that right to disclosure today, tomorrow, next week, 5 minutes time. Give us the disclosure, tell us the bloody truth, so that then we all as a planet can reach out to our fellow beings on another world and say hi globally, so that they can see that we are truly saying hi. They're saying hi with us with crop circles, and we know that they are. It's the same as that one, the image of the alien near the telescope, and he's holding the disc. What he's holding is the Voyager disc. He's holding the disc out of the Voyager spacecraft saying, we got your message. And we have never replied back properly. What are we? We are pawns. Our governments are treating us like mushrooms. They're trying to keep us in the dark. Well, we're not mushrooms. We are people. We have legal rights. And it's time this world started standing up and calling out for those legal rights, for disclosure. Get up off your backsides and say something. We want disclosure. We want disclosure now. We don't want it next week. It's time for disclosure. Give it to us, and give it to us now.
Did we never go back to the moon? Undoubtedly, man's greatest achievement, a feat which has apparently never been attempted again. There are many conspiracy theories surrounding the moon missions, some for good reasons and others not so. A mission to the moon, or indeed Mars, should be an experience which unites humanity under a common goal. Yet, alas, this unity rarely occurs. It is a well-known fact that knowledge is power, yet unfortunately this fact can often breed deceit and deception. For it is believed by some that knowledge only makes one powerful when it is concealed from another, regardless of whether this always be accurate within reality. Because of this system of accumulating and protecting power, space-going nations have gone to tremendous efforts to conceal things from the public, and indeed each other. The United States government, for example, demands astronomers, astronauts, and many other workers at NASA sign an oath of confidentiality. Upon breaking this oath, you could face a conviction of treason, a crime which carries the death penalty. However, regardless of this, over the past few years, more and more individuals from around the world have bravely began to blow the whistle on these secrecies. Dr. Ken Johnston, former director of NASA's Department of Photographic Evidence, has stated that during his stay at the agency, he was able to see original photos of countless ruins, pyramids, and intact temples all resting upon the moon. Not only are there now a number of independent testimonies made by numerous figures from within these space agencies and the accompanying programs, confessing to the concealment of ancient ruins on the moon's surface, but we also have compelling physical evidence of such structures, including photographs released by NASA themselves. One was snapped by the Apollo 17 astronauts in 1972. Subsequently uploaded to the official NASA website, it was originally labeled as overexposed. However, as technology has evolved and computer software has become more inept at refining images, it has revealed something amazing. Along with apparent pyramidal structure, clearly seen within this image, some investigators have also highlighted a possible monolith in the foreground. Was Space Odyssey trying to tell us something? Predictably, many people have come forward attempting to discredit this discovery. Yet, fortunately for us, in the December of 2008, the Hubble Space Telescope took some extremely intriguing images of its own. Images which seem to corroborate the once overexposed Apollo photo. Do these images actually show ancient ruins upon the surface of the moon? If this is the case, how did they get there? Or more importantly, who could have built them? Are these relics proof of an ancient space-going civilization? Or maybe extraterrestrial activity? Regardless of how they got there, we find their existence highly compelling and could be perceived as a possible motive for turning the space programs into black projects. Maybe we did go back to the moon. It's just most were never told about it. After all, knowledge is power. Thanks for watching, guys, and until...
It's also interesting that Dr. John Brandenburg, who was the deputy director of the Clementine mission to the moon, when water was found at the moon's poles in 1994, said the following: that is the Clementine mission, it was a photo reconnaissance mission, basically to check if anyone was building bases on the moon that we did not know of. Are they spreading? One of the images I have seen from the moon showing possible structures, the most striking is an image of several miles of ortholinear structures. This clearly looked artificial and should not have been there. As someone in the space defense community, I look at any structure on the moon with great concern because it's not ours. There's no way we could build something like that. It means someone else is up there. And this is what he said, according to what he said in the video. Now, beyond these two men mentioned, there are Edgar Mitchell and the John Brandenburg of Clementine mission. There are many claims by astronauts, scientists, and other officials about various mysterious structures on the moon. Either
said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings, there were very tall towers, and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. So I didn't say any more to him because I was concerned again that somebody was going to come in at any moment, would catch us having this conversation, and we would be in real trouble. I realized that he was telling me this information because he didn't have anybody else to talk to. Now, probably in that laboratory, he was probably one of the few enlisted people, and he was a worker bee. And he had a high-level security clearance, obviously, but he couldn't share that information with anybody else. And in those days, we didn't. When you had your security clearance, you took it seriously. It isn't like today where people don't take these things seriously. We had a different set of morals and ethics and values. That's the way we were raised, and we we stayed bound by those agreements. So it was rare that someone would do something like this. But this fellow and I were the same rank. I think he was very distressed. He had the same pallor and demeanor as the scientists outside the room. They were just as concerned as he was, and he needed to discuss it with somebody. So that was the end of it right there. I didn't take it any further than that. I just filed it away. But the interesting thing, every day that I went home, I would think to myself, I can't wait to hear about this on the news, And, so I'd turn on the TV and I'd look at the news to see if they're going to announce we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon, being really naive, And, of course, here it is 30-some years later, and we still haven't heard about it.
U.S. Air Force Airman Second Class Carl Wolf became an accidental witness to the first photos developed showing bases on the dark side of the moon. He saw multinational top clearance access individuals secretly huddling over the photos that looked to clearly show structures protruding over the lunar landscape, photographed by Lunar Orbiter 1 in 1966. As a director of intelligence for the U.S. Air Force Tactical Air Command at Langley, Virginia, beginning in 1965, he was privy to all Apollo mission photographs sent to Earth during their missions around and to the moon. As to the Lunar Orbiter 1 photos in 1966, he believed these photos would be revealed to the world within days or weeks. Over 30 years went by in absolute silence. He eventually realized this story was much bigger than anything he ever imagined. Not only were the moon structures of non-earthly origin, but upon his retirement from the Air Force, he was yet to see disclosure of these findings at all. He came forward to talk about it long after retiring from the U.S. military in 2001, when he joined Dr. Stephen Greer at the Disclosure Project National Press Club event in Washington, D.C., alleging NASA was intentionally covering up their findings. He knew this to be true firsthand.
One strange-looking rock formation that is too symmetrical to be of natural origin and resembles a building has perplexed scientists and excited UFO enthusiasts for almost 30 years. NASA's Clementine spacecraft was sent to space in 1994 with the objective to test sensors and components in long-term exposures and make scientific observations of the moon and near-Earth asteroids. During its mission, the lunar orbiter captured images of a bizarre V-shaped formation on the Mare Moscoviense region in the dark side of the moon. Measuring approximately 500 by 420 feet, the feature is formed by 2 rows of 7 lights and appears to be far too symmetrical to be of natural origin. Since it was released, and with the resurgence of the footage with the rise of the internet, Hundreds of publications and websites have speculated that this triangular formation could be some sort of alien spaceship, a base used by extraterrestrials to study the Earth and its moon. However, many believe it could be a top-secret moon base created by humans years ago. Although NASA has already dismissed the suspicious object as a digital anomaly in the footage, a former FBI special agent claims that the idea is not so far-fetched. Ben Hansen, now a lead investigator on paranormal television series, believes the intriguing photos may actually be confirmation of a decades-old project. In 1959, the United States proposed a military base on the moon, and although the project, dubbed Project Horizon, never progressed past the feasibility stage, many believe the triangular building may actually be confirmation that the venture came to fruition in a top-secret manner.
Last year, I received an email about the Apollo 20 case from a former American pilot who wrote, quote, "There is no doubt that the U.S. has been on the moon since 1962, but it did not use rocket propulsion to do this. However, rocket launches of Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo were used as a cover for the secret program. It is very possible that there were several Apollo launches, both before and after the official Apollo program, but they would have been launched from Diego Garcia, Kerguelen, or Australia, possibly Melville Island, or another secret launch area, a certified launch from Vandenberg, although possible, seems unlikely, because of the size of the rocket and the fact that it was going to the moon. The rotational speed of the Earth is significant in all Saturn launches, and therefore the launch has to be generally eastbound, since an eastbound launch out of Vandenberg would be very unlikely," unquote. And then I continue with my question to Moonwalker 1966 Delta. Unfortunately, I have never received an answer from him, notwithstanding my several emails. That's why I've decided to spread part of his email text. Can you comment on his opinion? And then I will read for your public then the answer, very important, by Moonwalker 1966 Delta.
Okay.
So all the people can find. Yes, all the people, all the public can find the interview on my website. So they don't need to buy my book. They can find all the interviews, the interview with the Apollo 20 commander William Rutledge, and the interview with the Apollo 19 commander on my website, and even on other websites, because I gave my permission, for the reproduction of my interviews just with my copyright note.
But the comment that I wanted to make is I know this case is very, very controversial. The people, that have seen the videos, a lot of people say that that's just a doll, the woman that they show in the video, or whatever. They're saying that there's no possibility of this. And there's a lot of curiosity as to where the launch point was. But the thing that I want to cover is that don't we have confirmation that the Apollo 19 and 20 missions actually came down and were picked up in the sea by two of our aircraft? And that, to me, would be confirmation that these missions did go and happen covertly.
We don't know yet. No testimonies, has come forward to confirm these aspects. But of course, we can understand if these presumed space programs, really did take place. We are talking about classified space programs, and
right.
That classified space programs, military space programs with NASA assistance, with the NASA staff involved in a sort of way, are always, under, the responsibility of the Department of Defense. And if you are a member of the Department of Defense, or you are under, the responsibility and the orders of the Department of Defense, you are not allowed to speak out.
Right.
And
right.
what I can understand is the following. There are some people, inside some maybe intelligence agencies that maybe are allowed to carry out like a disclosure program, but contaminated with the elements of contradiction. Because this is the only way. Yes, but here it's another story, because we have evidence, photographic evidence of something unusual on the far side of the moon. And the most important thing, one of the most important things about this is the following. Can you ask to the Kaguya team, to the Japanese space agency?
Right.
High resolution images of the far side of the moon, concentrated on the latitude and longitude indicated by the William Rutledge. Can you get the information? No, you can't. I did. I wrote some emails. I never received an answer. If you search for high resolution images of that particular zone on the far side of the moon, you cannot find anything. So what does it mean? One thing is sure. This is suspicious. It's very suspicious. Because if there is nothing there, and we are talking about just, a strange hill which looks like an abandoned alien spaceship, a wreckage spacecraft, very old, on the far side of the moon, and we just have misunderstood the data because of, the lack of high-resolution images. No, we can say, okay, it was a mistake, it was our mistake, and the Apollo 20 and 19 story is just big hoax. No, you cannot say this, because they are not available, high-resolution images.
I have a question along this line too, Luca, because in one of the videos that was released by the Kaguya mission, there's a particular video of the Earth in the background. Now, I don't know if you remember, but I had asked you to look at a specific spot on one of those videos, because it seems to me that in one of those videos, at the very end, right when they're about to go into the dark side of the moon, I saw what seems to me to be a base on the moon in this high-resolution, high-digital video. And I saw even a radar tower, even a couple of what you might call those triangular-shaped craft, and a lot of anomalies that look like squares and buildings and different things that are hard to deny. And my question to you is first, did you see that footage, and did you see those anomalies? And also, do you think that they released that to give verification that there is something possibly there?
My answer to your question is this one. I didn't see those details because I didn't have the time, and maybe I didn't have the attention that footage like this need. But I saw one of the footage made by the Kaguya spaceman, and I saw the Tsiolkovsky crater. The Tsiolkovsky crater is very famous because of the form, because of the black, the black color of part of it. And Tsiolkovsky crater is very close to the Fermi World Plane. So it is close to the Itzhak craters, which are several. And William Rutledge showed to us since the beginning that he was fully aware of of the nomenclature, of the astronomical nomenclature used to indicate the several craters on the moon, and the particular nomenclature which is used. For example, when you have a crater and then you have small craters around it, there is the habitat, there is the way to name the smaller craters around the main one with the letters. So, for example, you have Itzhak, and then you have Itzhak T. And I found out also because of the help I received by a Serbian scientist. Most of the people don't know, but I received many letters, emails from all around the world, even from some engineers from Italy, from United States of America, from everywhere. And among all these letters, some of them are coming from a scientist. Oh, I'm not a scientist. I checked his credential. He is what he says. He is a scientist. And he is very convinced about the presence of at least one, maybe more than one, spacecraft on the facade of the moon. And he is talking about the spacecraft indicated by retired FBI Moonwalker 1966 Delta. He is not sure about their identities. No, he said to me, "Well, Luca, maybe these guys, are just playing a game with you, but it doesn't matter. This is the main meaning of his point of view. We have enough evidence of the presence of lunar anomalies which look like spacecraft on the far side of the moon, and he found out the official, presence of Itzhak T like tango. So William Rutledge, since the beginning, showed to everyone, that he is a person, fully aware of many technical and historical, aspects of the knowledge of the satellites, of the solar system, of the space flight. I think this is too much for a single person, who is just someone who likes, playing games on internet. This is too much.
For the listening audience, just so everybody knows, the video that I was talking about, the Kaguya fly over the moon, it's on our website. It's featured on the main page of our website. You can go to www.fallenangels.tv, and it's the top left video in the featured section. I even tell you exactly which point to stop the video and make it as big a screen as you can. You want full screen. And then, if you take a look at that and you have a comment to make, either type it in the chat room or call in. But when you get a chance, Luca, I know at some other point, I would like for you to take a look at that video as well, and then give me comments about what you think, because I find it very, very interesting.
I will do it. Oh, let's continue with my consideration. You have this footage, made by the Kaguya space probe. You see the Tsiolkovsky crater. At a certain point, the footage is cut. You don't see nothing else. But it was a flyover, made by the Kaguya,
Right.
Which was orbiting around the moon.
Right.
So we don't have the chance to see, high resolution images taken by Kaguya over the Fermi World Bay, over the Itzhak craters.
Right.
So for some reasons, every time that there would be the possibility, to check what William Rutledge and Moonwalker 1966 Delta indicated to us, every time there is this possibility, something is wrong, What a coincidence.
Right.
You write emails, to the Kaguya space probe to get the high resolution images. For example, this is my experience. I didn't get the answer. You have the footage,
totally
but
ignored
you don't see nothing about the Itzhak craters. It's very strange. Very strange. Very strange.
Oh, also, Luca, can you give your website? Because people in the chat room are asking what your website is.
Yes, of
and
course,
I just want the listening audience to be able to find your work.
My website is the following: www.angelismariti.it. angelismariti.it. Angeli, you can write like this: A like Alpha, N like November, G like Golf, E like Echo, L like Lima, I like India, and Smariti like S like Sierra, M like Mike, A like Alpha, double R, so Romeo, I like India, T like Tango, again I like India, .it. I think this is the correct expression.
Excellent. Well, we thank you for that too, Luca. But please, yes, let's continue on with this story. One other thing I wanted to ask you. What about the Clementine mission? Because we know that the Clementine mission was for was it for the DOD, the Department of Defense?
The Department
and that
of Defense
mission
launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base in 1994, put into a polar orbit, and then it was sent to the moon. It was the first spacecraft, which was able to find evidence of water on the moon. So the water was not found out, by the Indians. This is not true. I mean, of course, they are increasing their knowledge. They are, they have a very, very, how can I say, exceptional skills. The Indians, the Indian Space Agency is improving. The knowledge, of our satellite, of course, but found out evidence of water on the moon, but it was not the first time. Clementine mission was the first mission, in the space history, which, showed to everyone the presence of water on the moon. And there was a press release, there was a press conference, if I remember, in Washington, D.C. So Clementine mission, it was a military, spaceport. This is what
and from what I understand, they took high-resolution photographs of
they
the
are
entire...
not available. They're not available.
Right.
If you go to any NASA website, to any military website, you can watch, the lunar maps, the reconstruction of the lunar surface through the Clementine images. But you don't go into the detail of the images. You don't have high resolution images. There are, of course, hundreds of thousands of images, but they are not available.
Right.
They are not available. Why they are not available? Of course, why? The simple reason is the following: because if they were available to everyone could understand that there is someone else on the moon, and this is all.
Heading down. Okay, you can move on forward. You're just barely crossing North Triplet. Barely crossing North Triplet. 6% fuel, okay. 150 feet. Receive this quantity light. Okay? Ice on. Ice. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. That's 20 feet down 2.5. Picking up some gusts. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Nice shadow. 4 forward. 4 forward. Drift into the right a little. 20. Down 1/2. 30 seconds forward. Right. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. ATA at a descent. House control both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 113 is in. We copy you down, Eagle. Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot. Thank you. You're looking good here. So we're going to be busy for a minute. After I'm on, right there, the big... I'll get this up to bed.
Presto, changeo. There's the TV. Oh, beautiful. I'm glad to hear that. Yes, sir.
Quote, "Have been following this collection and retired FB for many years, linking to articles writing on the quality and incredible nature of the subject in the videos. The YouTube station states there are new videos. I have watched and thought about this for a few years, and my experience with video production, computer generated image, I think, CGI. Can you help me? I can't remember the meaning. I think it's the creation of images through the computer. No? The CGI and related technology, as well as a long history and study of the space program, has confirmed this video are either authentic or someone has done millions of dollars of production, unquote. I want to make just a short comment. Among the video material spread on YouTube by retired AFB, there are some videos polluted with the former missions, like the Apollo 50 mission, because of the presence of the David Scott's voice in the video of the city, and other voices from former Apollo missions, like the Apollo 11 mission. So there are contradictions. There is something which looks like very strange. And in a few weeks, someone on internet and YouTube understood that the video of the city is a fake. But the main question is why, among all the material, and it is very clear that most of the material comes from an archive, and I believe we are talking about a classified archive from NASA, from United States Air Force, from some agencies which belong to the Department of Defense. We don't know, I don't know, but it's very clear that most of the material, were unpublished until the disclosure of a retired FB, Moonwalker, 1966 death. So the main question is, why among the video there is the video of the city, which is a manipulation? It is a fake. It's a video in which you can see on a lunar horizon what looks like a lunar horizon, just some structures. They look like artificial structures. And then you can realize that the composition of the background was made through Apollo 17 pictures. So authentic images, composed together to make a sort of, landscape, lunar landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the presence of David Scott's voice. David Scott is a very famous astronaut. He is an Apollo astronaut. And David Scott was a member of the Apollo 50 mission, if I remember. So the main question is, does it make any sense, to pollute all the material disclosed with such a fake? Or there are some hidden meanings? The first researcher who has understood this is Richard Hoagland. But years ago, when I heard his comment, he didn't say a lot about this. Just he was interviewed by Paola Harris, who is the Italian-American journalist who lives in United States. And he was interviewed, and Paola Harris asking something about the Apollo 20 case. And the answer of Richard Hoagland was something like this, the Apollo 20 case. It's a story in which you have someone who is sending some code messages, cryptic messages. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. Can you follow me? Thanks.
Yes.
But
you're fine.
After many months in which I tried, to read and read again and once again, and to watch again the material, to think about the information disclosed, to try to find some links, some connection. The most important thing that I did was to consult all the memoirs, the written memoirs by the astronauts. So I tried, to read the most important books written by the Apollo astronauts, to find some clues, to try to solve the riddle. at last, I think that I found the key. The key is very simple, and it is this one. David Scott is one of the people, one of the Apollo astronauts involved in the story. And do you know why? Because during his career, he was part of a secret program, a space program, carried out by the United States Air Force. But most of the people don't know this.
Right.
So it means that retired AFB, whoever he is, we don't know. We don't have the evidence that he is really, indeed the Apollo 20 commander, a retired Air Force pilot. But he is a person, very fully aware, of the history of NASA, and not.
On the 25th of January 1994, the Deep Space Program Science Experiment, DSPSE-1 or Clementine-1, was sent to the Moon by the US Department of Defense. Official reading: mission to test sensors capable of looking in multiple frequency bands, in ultraviolet, visual and infrared range, and to test 23 SDI systems. The satellite will be exposed to extreme heat and cold, and CCD cameras will have to deal with high level of radiation. Between the 19th of February and the 22nd of April 1994, Clementine made an unknown number of film strips of the Moon. Every 5 hours, one revolution around the Moon, some 6,000 images were received at the DSPSE Mission Operations Center, the DMOC, which was operated by the NRL. NRL imagery experts had 15 minutes to examine and censor images before they made them accessible to scientists. There was no time for a complicated obfuscation, so they used a basic but extremely successful technique. This is the Clementine satellite, and in the lower left corner and the upper right corner you see the DMOC center. Clementine used an imager, which is a Thomson CCD camera, a military standard, with field of view of 0.3 times 0.4 degrees, and this resulted in a long and narrow film strip of 5 kilometers wide, with Clementine at an altitude over the South Pole of 425 kilometers, and a pixel resolution of 288 times 384 pixels, which delivers smallest visible details in a resolution of 7 till 20 meters. Clementine facts, true or false? The history of Clementine shows a discrepancy. According to official channels, the Clementine story began in 1990. In April 1991, NASA and the Department of Defense concluded collaboration on the deep space mission. In November 1991, the NRL was briefed with Ballistic Missile Defense Organization on the Clementine concept. January 1992, the BMDO informed NASA on the Clementine mission. March 1992, fundings were received for the Clementine mission. There's nothing worth these official dates except this. November 1991, NRL was briefed by the BMDO on the Clementine concept, and fundings were approved for the NRL in March 1992. Well, I found a resume of someone who worked for NRL and who was involved in the DSPSE's program till May 1991. So was there already a Clementine program? This resume is on file. Then there is this mysterious case of the malfunctioning thruster and lost power. Was there really a malfunction? Did Clementine lose power, thus became a dead satellite? All official reports tell the same story over and over again, but that is because there's only one source of information. There are, however, a few discrepancies concerning the story of the lost power. So, how dead is the satellite really? Two sources. There are many more, but I show you two sources. A malfunctioning thruster depleted all of its maneuvering fuel and the spacecraft was stuck in Earth orbit. I repeat, Earth orbit. It lost power in June 1994 after studying the Van Allen radiation belts. And NASA calls, the mission ended in June 1994 when the power level on board dropped to a point where telemetry from the spacecraft was no longer intelligible. In February 1995, a group of specialists nicknamed the Batcave Bunch re-established contact with Clementine-1. Well, no data confirms Clementine-1 operational, but there is data on the internet available that indicates the following. It has been determined that all instruments and systems are continuing to function well with the exception of the ACS, the Attitude Control System, and that it no longer functions because of the depletion of fuel. This is a message on the internet which I found from the 1st of March 1995 from Stephen M. Collins, who works for JPL NASA, and he congratulates the Batcave Bunch on the recent contact with the DSPSE. And then he answers, kudos to the folks that built that battery. So did Clementine-1 have a battery with enough power to re-establish contact? This is the Pentagon press conference on December 3rd, 1996. And we see the first results of the Clementine mission. It's a composition picture of the lunar South Pole. According to an official statement by Colonel Dick Bridges, Director of Defense Information, the U.S. Department of Defense, Clementine 1 ought to be in an 11-year orbit around the Sun. That's strange, because we have seen that the Clementine was stuck in Earth orbit. However, when we look at orbital data, Clementine 1 is in high eccentric orbit with Earth. And, based on revolutions per day, she is near Earth 32 times each year. Closest approach to Earth 801 kilometers. Clementine 1 is still in space and not lost and gone forever. Real-time tracking Clementine 1 is possible but difficult. Of all online satellite trackers, there's one that tracks the satellite. The other trackers show data from a second Clementine satellite, a French electronic intelligence spy satellite. Fortunately, we can separate them via their unique NORAD ID and COSPER ID, as you can see here below. This is a screenshot of 2 days. The first is the 8th of March 2013, where we see Clementine in an orbit, eccentric orbit, approximately 350,000 kilometers from Earth. And the second one is from the 27th of March. And as you can see, it's now near Earth. This is the orbital data with the ground track. And you see in the lower right corner that you see that the satellite is currently making the swing around Earth. So the satellite is still active. And it's 32 times near Earth each year. These are the orbits of the two satellites, the Clementine 1, the US version, and the Clementine, the French version. This is purely hypothetical, but should Clementine be fully operational, then the satellite is Earth's most forward early warning system for approaching objects. Her cameras can see on multiple wavelengths. Thus, Clementine might be able to detect potential threats from outer space. The Clementine Internet Browser 1.5 web server does not allow download of files anymore, but when we try to connect, we see the name of the web server, and this one is most intriguing. Neither the US Department of Defense nor the NRL has ever been involved in scientific missions before 1994. There are zillions of possible alphabetical and numerical combinations, and this web server uses the name of Galilei. Is this a reference to Galileo? The Galileo connection. The US Department of Defense sent a satellite to the moon. The big question is why? Why send a military probe to the moon? There are official readings, but what if there was a hidden agenda? This is the Galileo spacecraft. Launch date 18th October 1989, and it made 2 moon flybys on the 8th of December 1990 and the 8th of December 1992. The Galileo spacecraft provided clearer views of the lunar dark far side and the north and south polar region of the moon than all Lunar Orbiter and all Apollo missions together. These high-resolution images, however, cannot be found anywhere. These are the only images I could find on the internet in databases. Of all high-resolution images that Galileo took, these photos are the only images available. Is there something on the moon that we are not supposed to see? Perhaps some kind of activity. An activity that produces strange colorful lights, streaks of light, and temporary coloring of the moon's surface. A transient lunar phenomenon, TLP, is a sudden and short coloring of the moon's surface. Most TLP are reddish, violet, pink or purple color, but there are reports of blue and yellow. They can also be star-like, flashes or streaks of light. TLP have been observed for at least 1,000 years and many by multiple witnesses. Scientists claim we see outgassing or the impact of asteroids on the moon's surface, but no proof builds these theories. This is a TLP. It was photographed by Leon H. Stewart from Tulsa, Oklahoma on the November 15th in 1953, located between Palace and Schroeter. Let us take a quick peek at the hundreds of reported TLP and notice the similarities in the observations. This is the front cover from the NASA TRR-277 report from July 1968. Well, TLP from year 1650 in the region Aristarchus, we see a red hill Mons Phosphorites. On the 1715, May 3rd, we see lightning on the face of the moon. There's a report on 1826, April 12, a black moving haze or cloud. 1836, two straight lines of light, a band covered with luminous points. 1839, July 19th. In Schroeter we see a dark mist. 1843, July 4th. The peak south of Alps. On Terminator saw an unusually bright spot that glowed like a fixed star. There are hundreds of these reports, and I'll advise you to read it. You can find it on the internet. It's freely downloadable. Crater Alphonsus is known for reports of glowing reddish clouds coming from the crater. On October 26, 1956, Dinsmore Elter, an astronomer, took photos of the crater in ultraviolet light, and he saw that the rails on the floor of the crater were blurred. The blur was not visible in the infrared photos he took, and he took them at the same time. This observation of volcanic activity was not accepted by professional astronomers. November 3rd, 1958, Nikolai A. Kozyrev made spectrograms of Alphonsus with a 50-inch reflector. While looking through the eyepiece, he observed that the central peak of the crater had an unusual reddish color and looked blurred. The spectrogram showed the emission spectrum of carbon vapor, and this confirmed his observation. Nikolai believed the TLP to be the result of possible volcanic activity. Unfortunately, his emission results were never officially confirmed. And these are the most common descriptions of transient lunar phenomenon: star-like appearances, bright brilliant spots, red spots, whitish clouds, hazy spots, nebulous appearances, streaks of light in red and yellow, lightning on the moon, lunar volcanoes, vapors, purple haze. Well, you name it, it's all kind of colors, it's all kind of appearances. These are the hotspots for transient lunar phenomenon on the moon. And this is the report from March 1978. And you see on top is Aristarchus, followed on second place by Plato, Proclus and Alphonsus. And these are the officially reported TLP only. And this is only the near side of the moon. So we have no idea how many there are on the far side of the moon. Most of you have seen this photo from Apollo 10. And many believe that it was a UFO or spaceship. Well, it's not. It is a TLP. I rotated the image and I performed contrast enhancement on pixel level, and suddenly the object is no longer in space, but appears to be on the moon's surface. And in my view we see a TLP, a bright or brilliant spot on the moon with hazy clouds. While the Apollo missions were carried out, 200 astronomers from 34 countries worked for LION, the Lunar International Observer Network, which was part of the Smithsonian Center for Short-Lived Phenomena. They evaluated Earth-based TLP observations and tried to verify these reports with observations made by the Apollo astronauts. On July 19, 1969, German astronomers observed the bright luminescence in the crater Aristarchus, and NASA was informed. The Apollo 11 astronauts, while still orbiting the moon in their command module, looked at the Aristarchus area, and Neil Armstrong, one of the astronauts, reported back. "Hey Houston, I'm looking north upward towards Aristarchus now, and there's an area that's considerably more illuminated than the surrounding area. It seems to have a slight amount of fluorescence." And this is the Aristarchus crater, photographed by Mike. from the UK in December 17, 2005. And I emphasized the colors for better viewing. What was so important that NASA gathered 200 astronomers to locate TLP? Was this part of the Apollo mission, and had they been waiting for something to happen? Why would I bring up the transit lunar phenomenon in this presentation? With bare eyes it's hardly visible, but there is a rather reddish spot on a color photo of the moon taken by Galileo. This is that high-resolution image, and there is the TLP. I selectively remove colors, and the final result is a photo of the moon in grayscale, and with one red colored area, which is located between the Shiner crater and the Blancanus crater. Okay, I rotated the image for better viewing, and I did some zoom in, and here you see the TLP. Now the object is blurred and out of focus. When we refocus and deblur the image, we see the contours. There it is. It's even better visible now. And on the right you see a picture taken from an astronomer from Earth, because this is on the near side. And this is from Google Earth, Google Moon, and here we see the Shiner and Blancanus crater, and right in the middle between the two craters you see this bright spot. And here's the one from Clementine, and you see near the arrow the bright spot, the location, the center of the TLP. On the 23rd of April 1994, a TLP occurred while Clementine was orbiting the moon. Clementine took pictures of the crater Aristarchus and provided evidence. After the TLP, the crater walls had turned redder. This is a report from April 23rd, 1994. Sky and Telescope published an article basically saying anyone who sees a TLP is just seeing an illusion. Well, Clementine was in orbit around the moon, took pictures of Aristarchus, and proved that the TLP really occurred, and that about 100 amateur astronomers really had seen it. And this is that photo from Clementine. It's a color composition, color ratio 255, which means that they exaggerated the colors. These are not the original red colors, it's exaggerated. After March 1978, the report I showed you with the hotspots, official registration of TLP apparently has been discontinued. I was unable to find any recent official NATO TLP reports on the internet. A special task force of 200 astronomers had been formed to investigate TLP during Apollo missions, and NASA no longer shows any interest in the phenomenon? Isn't that strange? The US, India, Japan and China sent satellites to the moon with super quality optics, and what do we see? Grayscale images. Why, I'm asking you? Is the moon's surface not the color they want us to believe? Chapter 2, The Pioneers. Other investigators before me also have tried to unravel the mystery of the hidden object. Here's a short overview of the achievements of two for me very important researchers, Mr. J.P. Skipper and Mr. Jose Escamilla. www.marsanomalyresearch.com is the website owned by Mr. Joseph P. Skipper, an investigator. On May 28, 2004, Mr. Skipper uploaded a picture on his website. And this is this picture he took from the Clementine browser version 1.5. And we see in the Zeeman crater, the smaller Zeeman crater, we see a hidden object. An object which obviously is obfuscated. The second investigator is Mr. Jose Escamilla from moonrisingthemovie.com. and he is the director of two masterpieces, Moon Rising and Celestial. And for his film Moon Rising, he too tried to unravel the Clementine mystery by using conventional Photoshop filters like the unsharp mask filter, which probably is the most used filter in image forensics. This is the original photo from Clementine, which I downloaded from the internet a long time ago, and this is the screen capture, Moon Rising. When we zoom in the screen capture, we see the object as Mr. Escamilla revealed it. And it looks like there is a humanoid standing next to it. Mr. Escamilla believed to see a humanoid standing next to a spaceship or a machine. Indeed, when you look at the contours, one could see the shape of a humanoid. This would mean that the alien object would be 2 times the size of New York. Now, this may seem ridiculous, but I'm asking you not to judge too quick, because in this presentation I will show you impossible things. These 2 pioneers have shown me that the Clementine anomaly is much more than just a smudge on a photo. Chapter 4: Obfuscation. This is a screenshot of the Clementine Lunar Internet Browser version 1.5. And this is the original picture from a Zeeman crater with the smudged object. I showed a reputable American astronomer the Clementine anomaly, and this is his response. The shape of the strange area is fully compatible with a missing data block. To me, having worked with similar data, it looks like they ran a fairly advanced algorithm to interpolate the missing data block. But these advanced algorithms can sometimes introduce artifacts that look like artificial structures. I can certainly recognize some of these effects right in that image. The explanation sounds logical, but I will show you that even the most logical explanation does not hold with our object. Official quote by the NRL: "The ultraviolet visible camera with 5 filters and the near-infrared NIR camera with 6 filters will each collect overlapping images. Each filter is used along the satellite's ground track such that complete mapping of the lunar surface for each of the filters of each camera will be accomplished during the mapping operation. The high-resolution high-res camera will make a continuous string of overlapping images. Continuous string of overlapping images. This is the moon surface, as seen by Clementine. And this is zoomed in. And we see all these swaths, all these little areas, these scanned areas. We see film strips, and we see hundreds of images. It's not just one picture. According to the DoD, many images from Clementine show data dropouts, and the smudged areas are not obfuscations but missing data blocks. Could high level of radiation cause these missing data blocks? Normal CCD cameras are sensitive to radiation, that's a fact. But Clementine's imager is of military standard, built to operate in radioactive environments. Clementine features instruments designed for 20 K-rad radiation, improved thermal management, improved radiation resistance, radiation-resistant glasses and optics, MPP CCD hard to 100 K-rad radiation, high-resolution camera uncomparable with predecessors, and optics comparable with NASA in the same size range. Clementine seems well protected against extreme environmental conditions in outer space. If there were data dropouts, then likely due to data transmission problems, but not because of radiation. So, according to the official DoD data, the approximate width of the film strips at the longitude and latitude of the object is 5 kilometers. What I show you here is not one photo. This is a composition of 7,590 images, and the size of the object contains approximately 98 images. One swath, one scan, is 5 kilometers in length and 2 kilometers in height, and the image width Total image of the photo is 275 kilometers, is 55 film strips. Each film strip contains approximately 138 images. And 55 times 138 is 7,590 images. The object is claimed to be a missing data block. Well, is it just one block or 12 strips? 12 strips means 12 revolutions. We know that Clementine needed 5 hours for one revolution. One revolution is one continuous film strip with 6,000 images in ultraviolet, visual and infrared. The ZMA smudge is one data block of 12 film strips, is 12 times 5 hours is 60 hours. This means that the satellite had data transmission problems during a period of 60 hours, and 12 film strips show 12 missing data blocks at one specific location? I consider that highly unlikely. On the 13th of February 2010, the Clementine browser version 1.5 was replaced by the Clementine Lunar Internet Browser version 2.0. All reported lunar anomalies had been carefully removed and the Clementine images updated. The NRL claims that with Clementine browser version 2.0, the quality of the images dramatically improved. Let us compare both versions. Here we see the 1.5 on the left and 2.0 on the right. And the image quality is different. But we can also see that these pictures are different. Look at the shadows. They used other film strips to composite a new picture. These are not the same images they used different images. And that resulted in a different quality. Chapter 5. Clementine's Missing Images. Clementine browser version 1.5 used only 170,000 images. The real made number of film strips is still a mystery. Because when we look at the official sites, they all have different numbers. This is the NRL, Naval Research Laboratory. And they say, during its 2-month orbit of the Moon, it captured 1.8 million images. SpudusLunarResources.com tells us that Clementine returned 2.5 million images of all mission sensors. ACT, a company that was involved in the mapping of Clementine, 2.0 million images. The US Department of Defense, approximately 1.5 million images. The Missile Defense Agency, or the BMDO, the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization, approximately 1.5 million images. Well, that is interesting because different organizations show us different numbers. Spudus 2.5 million, ACT 2.0 million, both non-military, NRL 1.8 million, and the Department of Defense and the Missile Defense Agency, both 1.5 million images. So there is a maximum difference between military and non-military of 1 million images. And that's a huge difference. How many film strips did Clementine make? In visible light, in ultraviolet, in infrared, and how many in total? Was it 1.5 or 2.5 million? If this is really the case, then 1 million or more images have never been published or made accessible to scientists. Why? Why would they do this? What is so important that the general public is not allowed to know? That you are now going to discover. Chapter 8. Mysterious Objects. There are indications that suggest that images may have been manipulated. The ZMA creator is hiding something, which we are not allowed to know. With bare eyes, the surface appears normal. This is the LROC browser, ACT React QuipMac. And we see inside the crater, straight into the crater, and we see rocks and dust. And we'll see the same thing with the Chinese Chang'e browser. And with the Clementine Lunar Internet Browser 2.0. And this is from the Clementine Lunar Internet Browser 1.5 on Google Moon. This is the original picture from Clementine. So let's zoom in and do some contrast and sharpening. Then we see that there's stuff lying inside the crater. When we zoom in further, we see objects. This is not rocks and dust. These are objects. And if we zoom in closer and we do more sharpening, then we see very distinct shapes. So what is it? It doesn't look like the pictures that we saw before. This is the color version from the same area. On the left we see the original colors, and on the right you see the stressed colors. I emphasized colors. And then we see that inside the crater it's green and blue. This is even better visible now. On top we have the original colors, and below we have the stressed colors. And look, the green and blue material is concentrated inside a smaller crater. And this is the latest picture from the LRRC, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, in color. And look, in the color enhanced box we see green and blue material. The Chinese Chang'e made high-resolution images of the Zeeman crater, but these images left me with more questions. Because when we zoom in on the Chang'e browser, we see weird things lying on the crater floor, but it doesn't absolutely not match what we saw before in the Clementine images. See, this looks totally different. Let's compare it. On top Clementine and below the Chang'e. I changed viewing angle and focal length so the image taken by Clementine almost matches the Chang'e angle. Objects clearly visible above look blurred, out of focus, and a lot smaller in the image below. So there has been obvious manipulation in the image below.
In a color lab one day when my boss, Staff Sergeant Taylor, came over to me and said that they were having a problem with some equipment on the base, and it was the first lunar orbiter program where they had a mission to pretty much locate the first landing sites for the 1969 lunar mission for the astronauts. So at any rate, he said they were having some problem with equipment over there. It was a similar equipment that we had. It was computerized contact printing equipment. And he wanted to know if I would go over and take a look at it. And he said to me, it's an NSA facility. And at the time, I didn't know what NSA was. I was pretty naive, and I thought he said NASA. So in my mind, for a long time, I thought it was a NASA facility that I'd gone to. But I remembered him saying NSA and converting it in my own mind to NASA.
And for viewers, the NSA is?
It's the National Security Agency. And I didn't know much about the National Security Agency until probably 10 or 15 years ago. Now the interesting thing, when my boss came to me, at that point in time, I only had a top secret security clearance. I didn't get my crypto security clearance for a few more weeks. It takes years to get a high-level security clearance like that, and they start that when you're in school. And only the honor graduates from these schools are the people who get the high-level security clearances. They also get to choose their duty assignment, which is really quite nice. It just was a fluke. I just happened to be well prepared for what I was doing when I went to school.
And how did you get to be in a position where you actually were to deal with the material we are about to discuss?
I was asked to go over to this facility on Langley Air Force Base where the NSA was bringing in the information from the lunar orbiter. And so I packed up some tools, I went over, I went into the facility. As I approached the facility, it was very lightly guarded. I mean, the base was under high security at any rate. I was surprised that there wasn't a higher level of security outside of the facility as I look back on it later. I went into the facility, I gave them my low-level security badge, they gave me a higher-level security badge. A couple of officers took me into this hangar. It was a very large hangar. As I walked in, there were people from other countries, a lot of foreign people from other countries in civilian clothes, with interpreters with them, with security badges hanging around their neck. And the first thing I thought to myself, if this is NASA, what are all these foreigners doing here? What are all these people from other countries speaking other language? Didn't make any sense to me. And I was really quite impressed with that. It just didn't grok. I was, what are all of these people doing here? And they were very quiet, very reserved, and there was a very peculiar pall hanging over them. They had a very concerned demeanor. Okay, so they took me into this laboratory. I took a look at the equipment. There was an airman second class in there. I was an airman second class as well. He turned the equipment on and put it through its paces. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. I saw what was going on with it. I said, I need to do some troubleshooting on it. It had little printed circuit boards in it with discrete components at that time. It was before we had integrated circuits. And I said to him, we'll have to take this thing out of the lab if we're going to work on it. We can't work on it in here in the darkroom environment. So he called someone to get some people to come in and move it. It was about the size of a small apartment refrigerator. It wasn't something you could easily move. So everyone left the facility, left the darkroom, except this airman second class and myself. And we're in waiting for someone to come to remove this piece of equipment. So while I'm in there, I said to him, I'm really fascinated with this process. How did they get the images from the lunar orbiter to the laboratory here? And he went through the whole process describing how the various radio telescopes around the world were linked and they telemetered the data into Langley Field. And at the time I didn't know what the real purpose of this darkroom and this operation and this facility was. I thought this was where they were bringing the data in and then releasing the images to the public. I had no idea that there were other issues involved in this facility. So he starts telling me all of this information, and I knew that what we were doing was classified anyway, and that he could only share a certain level of what he was doing with me because of the compartmentalized nature of our jobs. At any rate, he told me how everything worked. He showed me the equipment where the digital information came in, where it was converted to photographic images. They were doing 35 millimeter strips of film at that time, which were then assembled into 18.5 by 11 inch mosaics, they were called. There was a digital signature and a grayscale on every 35 millimeter strip. And those strips were from successive passes around the moon, and they would take and build up a photograph. They would scan one section of the moon, then another and another, and then they would get a larger image. So this mosaic then would be put in that contact printer, and that was then a print that was issued to whomever, the press, the scientist, whatever, wherever that was intended to go. So he was showing me how all this worked, and we walked over to one side of the lab, and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose? He said, yes, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And at that point, I became frightened, and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that if anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information. I was fascinated by it, but I also knew that he was overstepping a boundary that he shouldn't be stepping over. And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings, there were very tall towers, and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. So I didn't say any more to him because I was concerned again that somebody was going to come in at any moment, would catch us having this conversation, and we would be in real trouble. I realized that he was telling me this information because he didn't have anybody else to talk to. Now, probably in that laboratory, he was probably one of the few enlisted people, and he was a worker bee. And he had a high-level security clearance, obviously, but he couldn't share that information with anybody else. And in those days, we didn't. When you had your security clearance, you took it seriously. It isn't like today where people don't take these things seriously. We had a different set of morals and ethics and values. That's the way we were raised, and we stayed bound by those agreements. So it was rare that someone would do something like this, but this fellow and I were the same rank. I think he was very distressed. He had the same pallor and demeanor as the scientists outside the room. They were just as concerned as he was, and he needed to discuss it with somebody. So that was the end of it right there. I didn't take it any further than that. I just filed it away. But the interesting thing, every day that I went home, I would think to myself, I can't wait to hear about this on the news, And, so I'd turn on the TV and I'd look at the news to see if they're going to announce, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon, being really naive, And of course, here it is 30-some years later, and we still haven't heard about it. But at the time, I had been given about 30 of these photographs. They weren't photographs with artifacts in them, but they were photographs from that contact printer. I had some of them autographed by Dr. Colley, who was the head of the project at that time. And when I left San Francisco a few years ago, I actually sold them all in a yard sale because I was tired of carrying them around. And I may have a couple of them filed away someplace, but it was probably one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made. What was really interesting is I'm not sure what the resolution on those photographs were, but I know that we could discern from the satellite photography we were doing at our installation, you could read the license number off a car at that point in time. So I know we had that level of technology available. Whether or not it was on that lunar orbiter, I don't know. And this also always brings to question, in my mind, why we're getting such low resolution on photographs that we receive from Mars and any of these other missions. The resolution of these photographs is very low, when we've had, since the early 60s, the capability of much higher resolution. So I'm not sure what that's all about. That question always comes up in my mind. If I compare it to what I'm seeing now, because I do have photographs that have artifacts in them that are similar to what I saw, they're massive. Some of the structures are, half a mile in size. So they're huge structures. Yeah, and they're all different size structures in different photographs. You would have to have an above top secret security clearance, which generally would be cryptologic or above. In my case, I ultimately did have a cryptologic security clearance, and when I did have that clearance, I had access to all of the imagery from the U-2s, from the satellite photography. I had access to everything we were doing. Now, the thing that was interesting about my job as an electronics technician, I got to go into every area of the facility. I got to go into the war room at SAC, Strategic Air Command, and did maintenance on equipment there. So I would see a lot of data that people generally wouldn't see with my rank. Normally you would go into your job, you'd do your one little task. If you were a photographic interpreter, that's all you did. You didn't discuss what you did with anyone else. If you worked on U2 imagery, you worked on U2 imagery. If you worked on satellite imagery, you worked on satellite imagery. But you didn't discuss your job with anyone else. And you only did your task. If you were a photographic processor, you only processed the images. You were not allowed to discuss what you saw in those images with anyone else. We were briefed extensively about what this compartmentalization looked like. You didn't have conversations about what you were doing. So for me, I got to go into all these different areas and see what each of these people were doing, and some of them did share what they were doing. They would have photographs of the missile emplacements above their desk that they'd discovered, or they'd have photographs of the missiles on the decks of the Russian aircraft carriers, or I'd see various fresh spoil from a satellite photography around a missile emplacement in the Sinai Peninsula, as an example. We had in one room in our organization, we had a map of the Sinai Peninsula at that time that was made up from satellite photography. It was a mosaic, and it was 60 feet high and 60 feet wide. It was massive with great detail. So I mean, it was fascinating. And I saw vehicles, and I saw vehicles on these satellite photography that you could read the license plate on. They actually showed me that, so I know that was something that was real. At any rate, getting back to the compartmentalization, I had access to lots of different areas only because I was a technician moving from area to area. The only other person that would have had that kind of access would have been an officer with a high-level security clearance that had a need to know. Bottom line, if you didn't have a need to know, there wasn't any reason to discuss what you knew with anyone else. And even if someone asked, if they didn't have a need to know and they didn't have a security clearance, you couldn't discuss it with them. Everyone wears a security badge with a specific color, and you know that color represents a specific level of security clearance. And as you move from area to area within an organization, you get into higher and higher levels of secure area. You'll go through a gate, you go into a vault, you exchange your badge for another badge of a higher level of security. You're briefed on your job as to what your level of conversation can be with another person. You know, I was told, don't ask, don't discuss, just go in and fix the equipment. We'd sit down with a security officer, and he would review what your activities were, what you were doing, what you were allowed to do. They didn't ask you what you'd seen, they knew what I was seeing because they knew what I had access to. I was told to be very cautious when I was off base. I was told not to drink. I was told not to get intoxicated. I was told not to do drugs. I was told to be very cautious of people striking up a friendship with me because there were people who were gathering this sort of information. There was a lot of espionage around the base, military espionage, or foreign espionage. You can cut that one out. At any rate, I was told, don't let anyone take my photograph. Be very cautious about where I traveled, when I traveled. I knew that I couldn't go any place for at least 5 years without telling the State Department where I was after I left the military. Anytime I traveled, I had to notify and get permission to travel any place I traveled at that point in time in the United States. They had to know where I was all the time. We were told that when we traveled over a foreign area, as an example, if we went to Vietnam, there was always someone there with us, with a gun, ready to annihilate us, basically, if we should fall into the hands of the enemy. They didn't want the enemy to get us. We would be killed instead. So we knew we were operating under these sort of conditions, that your life was in jeopardy all the time should you fall into the wrong hands. So we were aware of that. I was told when I left that I would be investigated on a regular basis to make sure that I wasn't involved in any peculiar activities that didn't suit the government's needs. My security clearance expired in, I believe it was either October or January of 1998. And it was about 1998 that I actually, after my security clearance expired, I discussed what I had seen with my sister because she was interested in the phenomena. I read Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. In the book he said a lot of fantastic things, and he also said near the end of the book that there was a base on the backside of the moon. And when he said that, I said, aha. So I began to believe that everything he was saying was true. And he was saying a lot of really profound things about the crash in Roswell and alien technology and whatever, and how it had been mainstreamed through the Office of Foreign Technology by himself. So I knew that he was probably telling the truth. It just said to me, this guy's telling the truth, because I've had this experience and I know it's real. Yeah, it was Edgar Mitchell. He said, come forward, and I said, okay, it's time to start stepping out with this information. Because I was a little irritated, you know, that the government had been lying about all of this for years and covering it up. And I felt it was time to get beyond that. There's a lot more weight to this than I realized, you know, a lot more cover-up than I realized. Yeah, a lot more deception than I realized was going on. Well, some of the shapes, as I said, some of the buildings were very tall, thin structures. I don't know how tall they were, but they must be very tall.
Did you see profile shots of them?
I saw
angular shots with shadows?
They were angular shots with shadows. There were spherical and domed buildings, spherical and domed buildings that were very large. They must be, half a mile in scale, because they were, in relationship to the scale of the photograph, they stood out very clearly. They were large objects. It's interesting because I tried to relate them in my own mind to structures here on Earth, and they don't compare to anything that you see here in scale and structure. They're similar to a degree. I tried to relate them to metal structures, and I couldn't see a metal definition. They're more like a stone structure, but a fabricated stone. Some of the buildings seem to have very reflective surfaces on them. A couple of structures that I saw reminded me of cooling towers at power generating plants. They had that sort of a shape. Some of them were just very, very straight and tall with a flat top. Some of them were round. Some of them looked like a Quonset hut, with a domed kind of, like a greenhouse.
And all of these buildings were clustered together centrally?
The particular shot that I saw, there were several clustered together over a landscape, a fairly large landscape. Mm-hmm. There was one building that had a dish-like shape to it, but it was very large. It looked like a radar dish, but it was a building. It could have been a radar dish. There was another building near it with a truncated top, with an angular top that was truncated. I didn't want to look at it any longer than that because I felt that my life was in jeopardy. Do you understand what I'm saying? I would love to have looked at it longer. I would have loved to have had copies. I would love to have, said more about it or discussed it more, but I knew I couldn't. And I knew that young fellow who was sharing this was really, really overstepping his bounds at that point. I felt that he just needed somebody to talk to. He hadn't discussed it, couldn't discuss it, and he wasn't doing it for any ulterior motive other than the fact that I think he had the weight of this thing on him, and it was distressing to him.